What's going on? This is Theo Gremminger, aka the OG Fantasy, back at it. We're talking about the 2024 rookie class, and we're talking about the 2024 rookie class specifically at the running back position. This is a position right now there's the least amount of enthusiasm for any position in this draft class when it comes to fantasy football. There's just not a lot of steam. There's no Bijan. There's no Jahmyr Gibbs. There's no Breece Hall. There's no Ken Walker. There's no player that fantasy managers are like, okay, that's the dude that I need right now. There's a little bit of indecision right now in terms of where these guys should fall in the ranks. And there's a little bit of indecision right now as to where we can project these guys to go in rookie drafts. I'm going to help you out. I'm going to give you my own personal rankings. I'm going to go through 10 guys that I think I'm very interested in, where I rank them. And then I'm going to give you a couple guys that are like the next few guys. Not really sleepers, more as guys that can bust into these rankings. I think that the enthusiasm for the running back position is going to be higher at the end of February than we're seeing it right now at the end of January. I think that as people get to know this class a little bit better, they're going to like these players a little bit more. That being said, let's get it started. My number one running back in this class, and the guy that I'm flag planting, I had him, if you watched my other video where I dropped my top 24 rankings for single QB, you might have been surprised at where I had this player. So you're not going to be surprised at where I have him in the running backs, and that's Braelon Allen. Braelon Allen is my number one running back right now in the draft process. I'm flag planting him. This is a player that I'm very enthusiastic about in terms of what he can do as a fantasy producer. Allen is a beast. He's 6'2", weighs 245 pounds at least, and he's the youngest running back prospect in this draft class. He's only 19 years old. He was a big-time producer at Wisconsin. He ended his Badgers career with nearly 3,500 rushing yards and 35 touchdowns. And when you look at Wisconsin, again, we're not chasing the helmet. We're not drafting guys because of where they went to college. But it's kind of nice when we've had continued success from one school. And whether it's Melvin Gordon, whether it's James White, whether it's Jonathan Taylor, the Badgers have produced NFL talent at the running back position. I think Braelon Allen is the next one. And when it comes to draft capital, I think that there's some people that are all over the place here. There's some people projecting Braelon Allen to be drafted on day 3. And if he goes, in day 3, if this guy ends up being a 5th rounder, then I'm wrong. I'll still like him, but I'll have to reel it in and readjust my process. But I think when it's all said and done, this is a player that NFL teams are going to select on day 2. I also think that a player like Allen, who's only 19 years old, would not declare for the NFL draft unless the advisory committee gave him some sort of assurances that he would be selected at a range that was appropriate for him to declare for the draft. These guys that are projected late day 3 guys, they're not usually declaring early because it's a little bit of a risk with them if they could definitely go undrafted. With Allen, I don't think you have to worry about that. I think when it comes down to it, he is going to be an attractive player for teams picking at the very end of the 2nd and in the 3rd round. I think he could settle into the 2nd round when it's all said and done, because I think teams are going to look at him and say, this is a guy that I can plug right in, and I immediately have a guy who can handle volume. I am into Braelon Allen, and I will continue to have him as RB1 right now in the draft process. And I think his 40 time, if he runs somewhere in the 4.55 range, then you're going to see a little bit more steam with him. Because if he weighs 245, 250, and he can run in that 4.55 range, that's pretty fast when you do weight adjusted and you use things like a speed score. So we're definitely looking about where Braelon Allen's going to run that 40, and we're interested to see where he weighs in also as well. I'm going to get an official weight and an official 40 time, but he's definitely big and productive. My number 2 back is Blake Corrum. And Blake Corrum, I also flag planted as a guy that I really, really want in single quarterback leagues. I pushed him into the 1st round. And this is a guy that I think some people are a little bit bored of because he's 23 years old. There's not like the incredible excitement with a player like Allen where he's only 19. Blake Corrum kind of is what he is. But you're talking about a guy who is a mega producer at Michigan. If you are a college football fan or simply somebody who just watches, the bowl games, watches the college football playoffs, maybe watches Michigan, Ohio State, Blake Corrum. Like Blake Corrum scored 58 rushing touchdowns in his Michigan career, 58. And he had 3 seasons of 950 rushing yards or more. He was the offensive linchpin for Michigan's dream 15-0 season. He played great in the college football playoffs. If you watch the Alabama game, if you watch the Washington game, this is a guy where with, the title on the line, the national title on the line, Blake Corrum was the one Michigan continually went to. He scored a very timely receiving touchdown against Alabama as well. I think he can catch the ball in the league. I have compared him on the field to Ray Rice. I've seen other people compare him to a Doug Martin. I like that one a lot. I wish I'd come up with that one. But I've seen that one out there as like a stylistic comparison. He's got that 215-pound frame at like 5'8", where he's going to be like a compact player. He's got that nice size. Call him 210, maybe 215, 5'8". That sounds about right for Corrum. 5'9", maybe. But guys like that have been productive in the league. And Blake Corrum is, by all accounts, a very high character guy and the kind of player that NFL teams are going to be really into. Was considered one of the leaders on Michigan this year and last year. He almost declared for the NFL draft last year. He bet on himself, went back to Michigan. I think that's going to pay off for him. I think he's going to hear his name called on day 2, and this is a guy we're going to get excited about throughout the process. Now, my number 3 running back, this is an exciting player in terms of athleticism, and that's Trey Benson. And Trey Benson, he was the first Florida State Seminole to rush for more than 200 yards in a game since Dalvin Cook. And like Dalvin Cook, I think Benson's going to hear his name called on day 2 of the NFL draft. He clocked in at 22 miles per hour this season. I believe that was the Virginia Tech game. Clocked in at 22 miles per hour. So you're talking about a guy who's 6'1", maybe 220. And he's going to run the 40 in somewhere like the low 4.4s. Call him a 4.45 guy at 6'1", 220. When you start displaying that level of size and speed and athleticism, plus you have the fact that he's only 21, I think Benson is going to become a very attractive prospect for NFL teams. And the one potential red flag with Benson, and there's a few guys in this class like that, Benson had surgery when he was at Oregon. So he had a big-time knee injury back in like 2020. By all accounts, that's completely in the rear view. He transferred to Florida State, revitalized everything, and this year had like a really nice season. But just bear in mind, the physicals could change a lot of things with Benson. But as of right now, I think this is a guy that's going to steam up throughout the process. My number 4 prospect is Audric Estime. And this is a Notre Dame Fighting Irish running back. He's only 20 years old. And Estime is an absolute bull. He's 225 to 230 pounds. And he didn't run quite as fast as Benson, who clocked in at 22 miles an hour this season, but he clocked in at 20.9 miles per hour. So at like 225, 230, that's impressive. And he was incredibly productive. He had 18 rushing touchdowns this past season, and that is the most in Notre Dame history. So we're talking about Notre Dame here. We're talking about like old school. This is not like, the most rushing touchdowns in the history of like Boise State or UNLV. This is the most rushing touchdowns in any season, and shout out to those schools. But in terms of history, like, we're talking about Notre Dame here. Had the most rushing touchdowns in Notre Dame history for a single season. Very, very impressive. And when you talk about like Estime, he's a very proficient runner. He averaged 5.9 and 6.4 yards per carry over the last 2 seasons. But again, the proficiency is great, but we love seeing the production. 18 rushing touchdowns, most in school history. And then he ran for 1,341 rushing yards, which is 4th highest in school history. We have the youth on our side. He's only 20 years old, and he doesn't turn 21 until September. Despite the bell cow usage, he still has kind of manageable tread on his tires. And Estime, the thing about him was we saw these home run hitting touchdown runs. If anybody watched the Notre Dame Duke game, it was an absolute scare. Duke was like right there leading them the whole time. Estime broke off like a big 35-yard run to end the game. There were several other games. I think it was the NC State game. Estime broke off like a really big touchdown run. So he's got some home run hitting ability to him. Again, this is a guy that I think is going to sneak in on day 2. So once a couple of these guys start getting their draft capital, I think that this class, people will start getting a little bit more excited about these guys in this class. And the one guy that people are probably like, Theo, where is my guy ranked? And that's Jonathan Brooks. And I have Jonathan Brooks as my RB5 right now. And Jonathan Brooks can easily go from 5 all the way up to RB1. And if it was simply a Jonathan Brooks never got hurt this year, Jonathan Brooks would easily be my RB1 in this class. Jonathan Brooks was on that path. Jonathan Brooks is a Texas running back. He's 20 years old. He had almost identical. He waited his turn at Texas. You know, if you're watching a Dynasty-related video like this, you know that Bijan Robinson was the Texas running back before Jonathan Brooks. So there was Bijan Robinson selected in the top 10 of the NFL draft to the Atlanta Falcons last year. There was also Roschon Johnson, and Roschon Johnson was a 4th-round pick to the Chicago Bears. So Jonathan Brooks waits his turn at Texas. He was a redshirt sophomore this year. And out the gate, Jonathan Brooks just started making splash play after splash play after splash play. And his yards per carry average in the same Texas offense were identical to Bijan Robinson's this year. So he displayed explosiveness as a runner and also talent and efficiency as a receiver, a well-rounded back. He has good size and great athleticism, and he was well-rounded. The problem with Jonathan Brooks is he had an ACL tear, and that's why I have him ranked here. It's simply I need to get a little more assurances that NFL teams are not going to be scared off by this injury. Now, the timeline for this injury would mean that potentially Jonathan Brooks could be ready to go week 1 in the NFL season. So I'm willing to be flexible here in the ranking. Talent-wise, Jonathan Brooks could be number 1 for me, but right now I need to have a conservative outlook here and not get too hyped because I want to make sure NFL teams are not going to be scared off by a recent injury. We will know a lot more, as we get closer to the NFL draft and the draft process with Brooks. But we're talking about a guy that even if you have to wait on him, if you're an NFL team, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to want to draft him at a big-time injury discount because this is a guy who screams NFL starting running back and a potentially very productive one. So he is currently my RB5, but before, the haters come at me, I want to move him up. I want to be excited about Jonathan Brooks. And I would have had him right about where I had Braelon Allen or higher. He would be right after, if he never got hurt, then my overall top 24 rankings for single QB at this point probably would have been Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers, Roma Dunze, and then after that, Jonathan Brooks would have been right in that mix with the rest of those really, really, really talented wide receivers that I have ranked very highly. And Jonathan Brooks would have been ahead of Allen and ahead of Corm. But right now, RB5 for me is Jonathan Brooks. And my running back 6, I am super excited about. It's a 21-year-old, and this is the next 190-pound running back the drafters are going to get extremely excited about. And that's Bucky Irving. So it really helps Bucky Irving that Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, James Cook, and Kyren Williams all just had fantastic seasons this year at 190 pounds. Drafters are going to be more willing to take guys like Bucky Irving. You're not going to get that discount. And Keaton Mitchell, by the way, had some really, really impactful games also as a smaller size back. So we've seen it last year. There's going to be recency on the mind for drafters. And Bucky Irving is like that dude. He's super exciting. He excels in space, and he can make defenders miss. But the thing about Irving that's the most appealing is he led the entire nation in receptions by a running back. He had 53 catches in 2023. This is a guy that started his career at Minnesota, and he thrived after transferring to Oregon. You saw him take a big step forward as a receiver, but he's very well-rounded, an exciting player with the ball in his hands. He had over 1,400 combined yards for one of the best teams in the country. You're going to see Troy Franklin, hear his name called in the first round, maybe the early second, but probably the first for Troy Franklin. You're going to see Bo Nix go in that similar range of late first, early second. And you're going to hear Bucky Irving, I think, hear his name called in the third round. I think that the NFL teams are going to look at him and say, we want to go with a running back by committee. We want to get a guy who can be a high-value touch player that we can utilize and get him, and try to emulate the model that we saw with like Achane, what we saw with Jahmyr Gibbs, these guys like James Cook, where we can be like a 1A, 1B committee and have a high-value touch, dynamic, smaller running back like this. I think that the model is there. I think that's kind of where the league's going a little bit, and I think a lot of teams are going to go with that. And when it comes to Bucky Irving, he can immediately slot in as like the third down back plus. The third down back plus a guy who gets work as a runner. Exciting player, and again, I think a guy that I think people are getting more excited about throughout the process. Just pop the tape in when it comes to Bucky Irving. You will like what you see. Then another player who I think I have a little bit of a drop-off here between RB6 and RB7. I haven't quite tiered these guys out yet. This is more of a straight-up ranking, but just a natural, like, where I have to start making decisions. We're talking about RB7, and that's Will Shipley is right here for me. And Will Shipley, there's like no buzz for right now. But Will Shipley is 21 years old, Clemson running back, broke out as a freshman at Clemson. So, anybody who's been following Clemson knows that they've had a tremendous amount of success there. Will Shipley breaking out as a freshman. And during his time as a Clemson Tiger, he rushed for over 2,700 yards and 31 touchdowns. But for the next level, I think the most appealing trait for Shipley is his pass catching ability. He caught 85 passes in his career at Clemson, his 3-year career, and he did that at about 210 pounds. So expect Shipley to immediately slot in as like a third down back plus for whatever team drafts him. He's highly effective in the screen game, and if he lands correctly, he can immediately put up solid reception totals. So I'm keeping an eye on Will Shipley, and I think that the draft capital for Shipley, let's call him a 4th-round pick. I think that sounds about right for where people are going to value him. Now, my running back 8, this is a guy that I'm a little bit more bullish on. I could have easily made a case for running back 9, running back 10, or one of my players to watch, and that's Marshawn Lloyd. Right now, Marshawn Lloyd is my running back 8, and Marshawn Lloyd is a former South Carolina Gamecock, transfers to USC. He's a 23-year-old running back, a little bit older guy, but he has a small sample size and highly productive this year at USC. He's got compact frame, and he's got low tread on the tires. Not a guy that's coming into the league where people are worried about, hey, this guy absorbed too many carries in college. He had his best season as a collegiate in 2023, and he finished with 9 rushing touchdowns and 7.1 yards per carry. He was also pretty efficient as a receiver. Not crazy high totals, but was very good on yards per reception. Another player to keep in mind. Now, number 9, and this player could easily be ahead of Shipley and Lloyd. This is kind of like a pick your poison here. I would clearly have these 3 behind Bucky Irving, but Ray Davis needs to be mentioned. Ray Davis was a mega producer at Kentucky this past season. He dominated both the opportunities and the production. He posted back-to-back seasons with over 1,000 rushing yards in the SEC. One was at Kentucky, one was at Vanderbilt, made that in-conference transfer move. And he scored an eye-opening 14 rushing touchdowns this past season. He's also showed great promise as a receiver. He had 62 receptions over the past 2 seasons, and he had 7 receiving touchdowns in 2023 as well. Ray Davis is what he is, though. You're talking about a player who is 24 years old. So the age thing, Ray Davis is going to step in the league. He kind of is what he is. But what he is a running back who can catch passes and was highly productive for 2 seasons in the SEC. I think that he's going to be drafted ahead of where we saw another Kentucky running back, Chris Rodriguez, selected last year. So Chris Rodriguez was a 7th-round pick. I think Davis is a day 3 guy, but I think he'll go before that. Now, my number 10 running back is one that I'm really excited about, and I'm interested to see how he does down in Mobile, and that is Dylan Lobb. And Dylan Lobb is coming out of New Hampshire. And this is a player who I think his stock could rise dramatically at the Senior Bowl. He led the FCS in all-purpose yardage in 2022, and he caught 68 passes in 2023. So you're talking about a guy who can excel in many different ways, a versatile skill set. And I think down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, he could do some things. And this is a guy where I think we could see him rise up in terms of like what people want to see out of him in Mobile. If he has a big week, a lot of times these guys coming from the FCS need to have a big week in Mobile, and it really helps boost their stock. Think Christian Watson, what he did a couple years back. That happens. But Dylan Lobb, he only played 1 game against FBS competition this year, and albeit it was Central Michigan, but he went nuts. He had 12 catches, went over 200 receiving yards. This is a back who was incredibly efficient and can catch a lot of passes. I'm very interested in Dylan Lobb. And then a player who's in my top players to watch, Jalen Wright could have been as high as RB7 for me, coming out of Tennessee. Other players that I'm interested in are Dylan Johnson from Washington. Dylan Johnson, you'll remember if you watch Washington's run, he was playing hurt, which I think showed some toughness to NFL scouts. Rasheen Ali out of Marshall, I'm keeping an eye on him as well. And then I'm also keeping an eye on Cody Schrader of Missouri, big-time producer in the SEC, and Isaiah Davis, another FCS running back, different than Lobb, though. Davis is a big back out of South Dakota State. So, again, this is my overall rankings for my running backs. I'll run it back one more time for you guys. We have Braelon Allen at 1 out of Wisconsin, Blake Corrum at RB2 out of Michigan, Trey Benson at RB3 out of Florida State, Audric Estime out of Notre Dame at RB4, Jonathan Brooks as my RB5 for now, hoping I can push Jonathan Brooks up in these rankings, but we'll keep it at RB5 for now. Bucky Irving at RB6, Will Shipley at RB7, Marshawn Lloyd at RB8, Ray Davis at RB9, Dylan Lobb out of New Hampshire at RB10, Jalen Wright, Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, Dylan Johnson out of Washington, Rasheen Ali out of Marshall, Cody Schrader out of Missouri, and Isaiah Davis out of South Dakota State. That's my list of running backs. I'm Theo Gremminger. You can find all of my written work at Player Profiler. You can find me on all the podcasts here at Player Profiler. I'm dropping rookie content on Dynasty Life and Futurecast and Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast. I'm dropping redraft content on press coverage and first class fantasy. And you can find all of my videos here right at Player Profiler. You want to watch my overall top 24 rankings? They're here. I'm going to be dropping a wide receiver video just like this. I'm going to drop a Superflex video. I'm going to be dropping a tight end video and a quarterback video. I'm also going to do regular updates to these videos throughout the draft season, getting you ready for those rookie drafts and getting you ready to crush your dynasty leagues in 2024. Stick with us